Hello, I'm your host, Ray Dogum, and welcome to VibeCast. Join us to learn, imagine, question, and help us identify and develop biotech solutions together. If this is your first time listening, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share on YouTube, Spotify, and also Apple Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Ashish Diwan, who is the Director of Spine Service at the Department of Orthopedic Surgery in St. George Hospital campus in southeastern Sydney, Australia, where he leads a research program on biology of the spine in the context of its aging and repair. He's also the founder of Cartago, and today he'll be talking to us about the company, his experience, and also many other things in the biotech space. So, Dr. Diwan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray, for having me.
So first, I would like if you would give the audience background about yourself, your academic career, your research in general, and then we can kind of dive deep into that work.
Thanks, Ray. Actually, you did a very good introduction. I don't need to add much to it, apart from saying that primarily I'm a surgeon scientist, and we are supposed to be a rare breed and a rare species. There are not many surgeons and scientists around. And accidentally, I'm an entrepreneur. The reason I say accidentally is because we were investigating one of the reasons as to why the spine does not develop very well. And we figured out a molecule which was mutated, and then it eventually led to Cartago being formed. So that is the accidental part, but by design, of course, being a surgeon scientist and doing all the stuff that you mentioned is what I do.
I appreciate that. And if anyone is listening, and if anyone who is listening has ever broken a bone or had a fracture, I think this episode will be very interesting to you. So I'll make sure you stay tuned through the whole episode. What got you into medicine? I'm actually curious, like what drove you to becoming a surgeon scientist? Because everyone knows, it's not an easy path. What was your main motivation?
I think there are a series of accidents. There's a lot that has happened in my life, which has just been good accidents. Essentially, when I had finished high school, I was admitted to an engineering program, chemical engineering, which is what my father and grandfather did.
We share that in common, actually. I did not know that.
There we go. We figured out something is in common. And also admission to a medical school. And on the dining table, I'm like, okay, what do I do, guys? So the general tone was, there are too many engineers in the family. There's not many doctors. Why don't you become one? So that's what ended up me being a doctor. And then when it came to that crossroad as to when you decide you want to be a surgeon or you want to be a non-surgical specialist, that was also a series of accidents. Is a very good friend of mine. His father had a big surgical practice, and he was always nudging me and pushing me in that direction, though my primary interest was trying to understand immunology, molecular biology, and I was more in tune with how the human body is made, how the whole structure forms. But then I thought maybe, surgeons are on the other end. When you come to the destruction piece, I could do that and then swing by sometime later and figure out, how these molecules help repair, healing. And it's interesting that you mentioned fracture and bony fractures, because that's where my career in science began, because my PhD was in the area of fracture healing. I was the first one to actually discover the role of immunity in fracture healing, and that was many years ago. It's almost embarrassing to say it is about 25 years ago now. But I sort of investigated the role of nitric oxide in fracture repair and demonstrated which types are expressed when. There was not much we knew about healing of bones then, and we have known a lot. And I have realized that what I did as a PhD scholar was foundational to a lot of stuff that we understand about fracture healing and fracture repair, which is where bone forms. And one of the crucial steps in bone formation is a stage where the bone breaks. There is a big blood clot. There is a lot of inflammation, and that is where immunity comes in. And as the inflammation settles, the bone starts knitting together with a bit of cartilage. And that cartilage then eventually gets replaced by bone. That's kind of fundamental to where we will end up in this discussion as to why that cartilage phase in the eventual bony formation, especially of long bones, I'm not talking about flat bones, is so critical. We also see that phenomena in two other situations where there is a cartilage interface and then bone forms. One is when we are developing from within the embryo, as fetuses develop and bone form. That is one thing that happens, is you get a cartilage interface and there is bony formation apart from the segmentation of the embryo. And the other situation is as we grow taller. When we grow tall, it is actually the ends of our long bones which are adding a little bit every day to making bone. And there again is a segment which we call physis, which is below or adjacent to your joint, where there is a bit of cartilage, and every day it adds a little bit of bone. So till the cartilage is alive, you keep on growing. And the moment that cartilage vanishes, you stop growing taller. So that phenomena that we see in fracture healing is so critical to our entire development from an embryo to becoming, an infant, and then for growth from infancy to adulthood as we keep on. So that process is an important process.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have a bunch of questions. One being, have you found any sort of way to inhibit the stop of that growing, or to basically continue the growth? Basically, is it possible to interfere with that process and potentially allow people to be taller? And I know this is not the focus of our podcast, but just while you were talking, I think that
intrigue. Ray, you may be a little bit beyond me keeping you tall, because you're older than 22 years old. Let's put it that way. Yes, that is a possibility. But again, as you said, this is not part of a conversation. But that is again something that can be explored based on our own invention. And there's a group of surgeons out of a hospital for special surgery in New York, which is where I trained as a spine and scoliosis surgeon, who's the chief of pediatric orthopedics there. Is very keen to investigate that. So hopefully one day we may investigate that further, because it has implications on other things apart from just height, which is what everybody would be concerned about. Everybody wants to become a bit taller. But for us as orthopedic surgeons, there are two other situations where that is important. If somebody's broken their wrist, and there is what we call as a growth plate arrest, which means as they grow, the wrist will keep on getting deformed, or any other joint for that matter. So whether we could inhibit that. And there's another situation which we see commonly, which is scoliosis. And again, if we can sort of either stop or prevent the inhibition of growth on one side, which is the concave side of the curve, we may be able to make some progress. So yes, cartilage, its role in growth development is phenomenal. We continue to investigate it, and there are possible solutions for some critical human conditions that I think we can offer some hope in the future.
Absolutely. And maybe we can now dive into what motivated you to actually found the company Cartago, and maybe talk a little bit about that and what you're trying to accomplish there.
Okay, so just continuing with the theme of accidents in my life. So this was another one where with a bunch of my colleagues and friends, after a discussion and argument, we were sort of chasing a condition called Klippel-Feil syndrome, where people are born with short necks. And I'll just put this model in front. This is the lumbar spine. I've used it just because the size is much bigger. But what I'm showing is a bone here, which is the vertebra, a bone here, which is another one below it, and this is the shock absorber disc. So patients with that syndrome had an absent disc, and this bone is joined to that bone. So it is fused. So that's why they end up having a shorter neck. So we were investigating that, and we figured out that when there is a mutation in the pro-domain of one of the proteins, it leads to that condition in a series of families. So that was a big advancement in the sense that we used to think it is mutational, but we figured out there's a bunch of families that have that. So my own feeling and thought was, we're done. As a scientist, I've contributed to understanding one human condition, and that'll be enough. I can just focus on looking after my patients, majority of them who suffer from this back pain, a lot of which I could not do much for, other than either give them some pills or offer them a spinal fusion surgery. So go back to that, be a clinician, and leave the rest to the scientist. But again, as would have it, my wife, Divya, who's a co-inventor, I sort of did the discovery, but she's responsible for the invention. So she goes, okay, you keep on complaining every night about these patients, you're unable to do much. And you found this molecule. Why don't you use this molecule for those patients? And I'm like, what do you have in mind? So she explained, being an MD, PhD in pediatrics, and she explained to me that the events that happen during healing are the same as embryonal. You know that. So, in science, all those light bulb moments happen. So this was one of those moments, kind of, I knew all the story, I knew that, but I was unable to put them together. She did that for me. And then we designed a series of experiments. We took it through 4 preclinical animal work to get confidence as clinicians that this molecule will work. And as we went on to our various scientific congresses, we realized that this is the only molecule which has an established target in humans. The rest of all the attempts are, I have this molecule, where can I put it? Let me see what happens. It was still, it was not based on a solid target. Most of the efforts were wasted. So said, okay, I think this is a serious thing. We can get some intellectual property, try to commercialize it. That is where that interest came from. And that's why we formed the company about 2 years ago. And we're getting the protein manufactured to GMP standards so we can start early human clinical trials.
Excellent. And how many people are sort of affected by Klippel-Feil syndrome?
So, those numbers, because nobody has gone out to do a proper survey, that data is not available. But in my practice, I'll tell you that I see about 10 to 12 patients every year. So it is not a disabling condition. It is not a condition which we are treating. What that condition has taught us is that there is heterogeneity in its formation, and it has taught us that there are some signal transduction issues that happen, which, if addressed, may have some role in addressing the bigger human issue, which is that of back pain, which is where our therapy is focused. It's very interesting. It's very interesting in terms of the number of people who suffer back pain. It is not a lethal or a paralytic condition. And when you tell that, some people who have suffered too much, they will appreciate it. But majority of the people do not appreciate it as you would appreciate, hey, Uncle so-and-so has got cancer. Oh my God, right? Auntie so-and-so has back pain. So what? But the interesting piece is that somewhere about 2-3 years ago, the cost of treating back pain, the direct health-related cost of treating back pain, exceeded that of cancer in the United States. So we're tracking at close to about $130 billion per annum in direct health-related costs for back pain, because at a given moment, 7.3% of the world's population has back pain. So it is a massive issue. And we don't have the gap in treatment is humongous. So you keep on suffering. Normally they say the back pain should go away in 3 days. All right, 3 days it hasn't gone. No, it'll probably go away in 3 weeks. Majority of the patients do get relief at that point. Do some exercises, you'll get better. Yes, if a lot of them do get better with it. If not, pop some Advil, go get a steroid injection, do some chiropractic work, do physical therapy, change your mattress. You do all of that. Now you're talking about millions and millions of people. Of that, you still end up with 20% at the end of 6 months who still have unremittent back pain. So what is on offer for them at this stage? What is on offer for them at this stage is, hey, go get a spinal fusion done with some screws and bolts, costs about $120,000 or $60,000 to $70,000, depending on which state you're in or where you're located. Or alternatively, pop some OxyContin. So you sort of,
options aren't good either way here. It's super expensive, invasive surgery, or numb the pain until you might become addicted to a substance.
Absolutely. And then it's a downhill situation. So that is in terms of option. Then we have some very interesting data that comes out from epidemiological surveys in Australia. And it says that normally people who are in the sort of laboring category, they go out to work in their 14 and 15 years of age. They haven't finished school. They're doing heavy laboring work. So their lifetime between 15 to 45 is what their working life is, because most of them then get disabled due to injuries to the back. If you have an injury to your limb, easy fix it, manage it, go. But if you have a back pain, it keeps on coming and going. There's no predictability to it. You don't know if you can take a job, you can get in there. And the data shows that if the person is the only breadwinner in the family and suffers from back pain, the statistical probability of that family going below the poverty line is humongous. It's about 80%. So you have the effect of this is, in terms at a personal level, at a societal level, at a national productivity level, is humongous. Talking about national productivity level, if this guy is not working or the girl is not working, then they're not paying taxes. But not only that, we now have to pay them Social Security. So that's a recipe for a country becoming poor, which is something that people know about. Decreasing productivity will cause it. And one of the major causes of decreasing productivity is back pain. So not just laboring, on the other hand, you work for Amazon, you're sitting there. Ray, I'll encourage you to stand up for the next podcast. But
so I'll let you know, I do have a standing desk, and most of the time I try to stand.
That's wonderful.
While I'm recording,
that's a smart move.
Absolutely,
that's a smart move. One way you will avoid using Cartago's therapy is if you exercise well and you're standing. But having said that, this is an opportunity. The market size is humongous. Still, there are a lot of people suffering, and if we don't have to fuse somebody's spine, and we can improve the quality of their disc, if we can improve the pain, I think the contribution that we as a company could do be humongous.
So let's talk more about Cartago's therapy then. What's the actual solution look like? How is a person to take this therapy? What is the mode of application, you can say? And then we kind of talked about the standard of care already, but how does Cartago's solution compare?
Yeah, but I think Cartago's solution is a recombinant protein, which will come as an injection. It'll be off the shelf. You just put some saline, you can reconstitute it. It'll be easily transportable from place to place. And once you make that, then under some sort of an imaging or image guidance, either a CT scanner or a fluoroscopic imaging, the physician can take a needle right into the disc, making sure that you don't hit, this is usually the axis that we go through from the side into the disc, avoid the nerves, and you get a single dose, and that single dose over the next 3 weeks to 3 months gets rid of the pain and regenerates the disc. That is the solution. In terms of, right now we don't have an intramuscular injection or an oral, option, but those are the things in the fullness of time we will work together, because right now our focus is to first get a direct therapy. This tissue is very difficult for drugs to reach and validate it. And based on the data that we have, we're very certain that it will work and it will do wonders.
Sounds exciting. Can you talk more about your clinical research plans?
Sure. So we will be ready to do a sort of GCP phase 1, phase 2 trial in Q2 of 2024. So the protein is manufactured starting November, December. The toxicological studies will start, and we may for phase 1, 2 skip some of the stability studies, but go ahead and proceed and do that. And at this stage, we are focused on getting the phase 1, 2 done here in Australia, because we have some great facilities. We have a great infrastructure to be able to do that. And we will probably recruit anywhere between 8 patients for phase 1 and another 30 to 40 for phase 2, which we can get done very quickly, just as a safety and dose escalation study. The phase 1 will also give us some pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic data. So we will do that here, and then get our IND package ready to do a much larger phase 3. And the idea is to be doing that in a multi-centric manner, mostly great number of centers in the US, a few in Australia. That is the main focus, and that sort of lines up with a fundraising plan also as to what we propose to do with the company.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are, many patients out there with significant pain that are looking for alternatives, potentially like Cartago. So, I'm very interested to see how those results look when you do those clinical trials. Let's jump into the business side of Cartago. Now, we talked about the science a bit and the issues around, back pain and current standards of care. What are how is your company structured now, and do you have investors?
So we are an Australian private company. We call it PTY Limited in Australia. And we also, within Australia, we have federal government support in terms of development and tax incentives. So those grants are extremely helpful. We initially bootstrapped it. We do have investors, and these are basically extended stakeholders, essentially, in the sense that they are treating physicians who have put in significant amount of money. Right now, we are raising still what we call as a seed of $3 million with a defined post-valuation amount. And the plan then is to move the company to the US for the next round raising, which will be for the phase 3 clinical trial, where we will be raising about $25 million odd dollars. That could increase or decrease depending on the number of cases we may be required to do based on sort of a pre-IND submission and discussion with the FDA, what size, how big the clinical trial needs to be.
Right.
So we do have investors, but we are still actively looking for them on the seed stage, and then making the big move for the bigger, larger raise next year sometime.
And I understand in our introductory conversation we had that you're, as you mentioned now too, that you're planning to move to the US and to develop to incorporate a Delaware corporation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's a common thing, right? What are some of the benefits that you perceive in doing that?
I think, straight off the bat, the biggest benefit is access to a very sophisticated and much larger pool of investor money, number one. Number two, it gets you closer both to your regulators as well as markets. So these are, the outstanding benefits. The challenges for us is how do we manage, what are the tax implications for the company which is flipping. So we're getting some good advice around that piece locally here in Australia, and also with some US lawyers. So I think we will be able to successfully negotiate that piece over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I think the advantage, as I outlined, is of significance. So if you weigh the amount of work versus risk benefit, and that is why I think we are headed strategically in that direction. And all our current shareholders are lined up to that. They're more than happy for us to go ahead and do the Delaware program. So we're in a good position with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that you're looking for investors. What other kind of partnerships are you seeking, if any?
So one of the things as we search, that's a good point. Maybe I'm sort of going ahead of myself in indicating to you that we are part of an accelerator. We were selected to be part of an accelerator out of Philadelphia, which helps companies like us to come into the US. And as we negotiate our way and understand various things, what has clearly come to our fore in terms of partnerships is to identify people who have already done this before, who have taken drugs through regulators. So essentially, we are looking for either previous founders or previous people who might have exited this biotech space to come and take a leadership position, an executive role, an operational role to take it further. So that is one part of partnership that we are looking for. The second part of partnership we are looking for is to get a good, nice, balanced board whether it is a formal board for the Delaware flipped entity, or whether we start them now as an executive advisory board to help us, negotiate all of those things. So those are the two critical things. Of course, other than looking for funds on an ongoing basis for equity, most of the time, that is what we are looking for. We are very comfortable in terms of where we want to eventually be in terms of trying to, when we are ready for the markets, as to who will sell it, what will sell. We know that piece, we are pretty much sorted out. What we are doing right now is de-risking the asset for that eventual exit.
Makes total sense. And if you take a high level view of the company now, what would you say are your primary and value inflection points that you're navigating? And you mentioned, I'll let you take
absolutely. Vince, a lot of inflection point valuation depends on who's the person who's either going to invest into you or acquire your company or take you across wherever you need to be. So at this stage, at this moment, without looking very far off, where I see is that we have an IND package prepared and approved by the FDA. That I see as an inflection point, number one. The second piece I see is, we have good phase 2 data, or we have completed a phase 3 study. So each one of them is going to be a value inflection point. Right now, as we raise the seed capital, we have already met our first value, inflection point, and that is why we are raising the seed. Till then, we were not ready to raise the seed. Is getting an IP position strong, getting our protein made. It took a long time. Believe me, it has taken more than 3.5-4 years to get this protein made. It's not a simple MAB to be made. It is a little bit more complex than that and stable. But we are over that hurdle, so we'll feel confident that if we are taking seed money from people, we will give them value. So I think that inflection is come and gone. The next one is to get approval by our ethics committee to start a phase 1 trial. I think that in itself will be an inflection point. And then every time we get data, they will be adding to those inflections.
I appreciate that answer. And my final question here before we sort of wrap up and conclude, from your perspective and based on your experience, how is the current economic environment affecting deal flow and investments into early stage biotechs like yourself?
So what I have learned over the years is that if you are an inventor, if you are a founder, if you are raising money, the environment is never conducive to you, irrespective of all that. You cannot wait for the economic environment to try to suit what you want to do. I think we just need to keep our head down and keep on progressing. Yes, there are headwinds, but with the economy is worse than, what I say is it behaves more like a irritable bowel syndrome. You don't know which day it'll be better, when it'll be bad. So I'm no expert on the economy. I know it is of great value, but yes, from what I hear from the chatter is that it is impacting deal flows. It is impacting valuation of good assets. So, the challenge is that I'm here to get this into humans. And if there are investors who join the journey to make sure that we make it valuable for them, whatever the economy does, we'll deal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's not your job to predict any sort of economic changes. No matter what, if you're building something valuable, the market will recognize its value. So Dr. Diwan, I just, again, want to thank you for your time today. I really do appreciate it. If anyone out there is listening and enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe to VibeCast. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments or anything you want to share. If you have a broken bone and want to figure out how to heal it faster, maybe that's a question you can feel free to comment down below. So again, thank you again.
Thank you, Ray.